View from both sides of the aisle right now. From the House, anyway, you've got Republican Congressman Phil Roe and Democratic Congressman Jim Himes. And thanks to both of you, I know that you both voted for the tax bill. Now we've got to move on to omnibus. Congressman Himes, what's going to happen here with? Are we going to get a government shutdown, do you think?
No, we're not going to get a government shutdown. What you're going to see, I think, is a continuing resolution come out of the Senate, get approved pretty quickly in the House. I think the big question is, how long does that continuing resolution last? So I think we'll get this wound up in the next couple of days.
Congressman Roe, you ready to work a long weekend here, sir?
It's fine with me. I said last night reminded me when I was back in practice delivering babies being up at midnight, so it's not a problem at all.
All right. Well, to both of you, I got to talk about this $1.2 trillion omnibus bill. And Congressman Himes, to you first. I mean, the way that we saw voting happen in November, it looks to us like folks don't want pork barrel spending from Congress anymore. Are you ready to make some hard decisions with regards to earmarks?
Well, you know, if we want to make some hard decisions, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to start being honest about earmarks. And to be honest about earmarks, we're going to acknowledge that they are not the solution to this country's fiscal issue. Look, they're subject to abuse. I get that. They're also, by the way, funding hospitals and roadways and libraries in people's districts. So when you say they don't like earmarks, you mean that in general. You don't necessarily mean that in specific. But if we're going to have a real honest conversation about how we fix the federal budget, which we will, we'll either do it voluntarily or we'll be forced to do it, we're going to be honest about the fact that earmarks are about less than 0.5% of the overall federal budget.
But Congressman Roe, it was $8 billion of earmarks in this omnibus bill. That's one of the reasons that it got yanked last night. It was a fierce battle in the Senate last night, Congressman Roe.
Yes, I think the voters said we're tired of this, and I agree with Congressman Himes. What we have to do is define what an earmark is. When I came to Congress, I came with the pledge not to ask for any earmarks, and to find that everyone knows what a bad earmark is. It's a bridge to nowhere, an airport that lands no airplanes, people, statues to congressmen. I mean, just awful things that waste people's money. Absolutely, if you can define what they are, roads, bridges, schools, there's a way to do that with transparency. And when you have several thousand earmarks, and on our side of the aisle this year, the Republican Party has a moratorium on earmarks until we can fully define and make it transparent so the taxpayers' money is not wasted.
And well, Congressman Himes, I mean, do you think that you can get more of that sense over on the Democratic side? Because what we heard from the Democratic Party was we're not going to, you know, put any type of moratorium out there on earmarks. That's what we were told.
Well, this isn't a party thing. As the congressman points out, on the House they had a ban on the Republican side on earmarks, but in the Senate they had a Republican festival of earmarks that are in this omnibus bill that is not moving forward. So I'm not sure it's a partisan thing, but I completely agree with my colleague that if we're going to do these things, and let's face it, people do want assistance to build hospitals and to build schools and roadways. If we do it, let's do it in an objective way, in a fully transparent way. Let's make sure that everybody knows who's asking for what and that there is actual real merit behind these requests. I do think there's a better way to do them, but I don't think it's a Democratic-Republican fight. This has been something that's been going on in Washington for a very long time on both sides of the aisle.
I've got a colleague here that's got a question for you, gentlemen.
Yes, Congressman, it's Rob Morgan. Two-thirds of the population support the tax cut bill. I support it as well. Yet it's going to add close to $1 trillion to the deficit. Long-term concern. But talk a little bit about any plans for bipartisan talks for spending cuts.
Congressman Roe, can you start with that one?
I certainly can. I think one of the things I would argue about is I don't argue that leaving people their hard-earned money adds to the deficit. We have a spending problem here in Washington, D.C. I was a mayor before I got here. I'm absolutely astonished. I don't want the American taxpayers to send us another nickel of their hard-earned money until we can show some restraint on spending their money. So, yes, I think there's going to be. I think there's a way you can go back to a baseline budget of 2008. If you do that, it saves $100 billion a year. And I think both sides of the aisle, if we correctly interpreted this election, better do that.
All right, Congressman Himes, same question.
Well, I think, you know, we took a big step forward on something that I was gratified to see. I'm not going to use the word delighted, but gratified to see, which was the report that the Simpson-Bowles Commission put out. And they had some really thoughtful ideas. First of all, that you be very careful what you do in the near term in a very difficult, very hesitant recovery. You know, if you were to start slashing budgets right now or raising anybody's taxes, you would really run the risk of throwing us into a double-dip recession. So they said, let's start in 2012, late 2011. And then we start a conversation, which is an honest conversation, conversation, which makes nobody happy, right? Yes, spending restraint is absolutely critical. But guess what? You know, unless you can solve this problem entirely through spending cuts, which I promise you is not possible, we're also going to talk about revenue. And we're going to have a discussion where both parties come together with no sacred cows, no ultimatums, no pledges that I'm not going to do X, Y, or Z. And if we're doing our jobs, we're going to put together a compromise that makes absolutely nobody happy, but which puts this country on a sustainable fiscal path.
Gentlemen, thanks to both of you, and then we look forward to seeing what happens in the House with the bill, and, well, the Senate as well. Republican Congressman Phil Roe from Tennessee, Democratic Congressman Jim Himes from Connecticut. Thanks to both of you. All right, retailers in the Sunshine State looking for a ray of hope, but as a tax holiday, what Northwest